Well, I think that we got a great opportunity to get a lot of guys, a lot of reps out there today. Unfortunately, because we've been inside a lot and having a lot of rain, this was probably the kind of day that you'd like to have practice every day so that when you have a day like this, the players would be more prepared for it. But I thought they, sort of persevered pretty well through it. I think the most important thing for our team right now is to focus on what we need to do to improve. I mean, there's not one player that played out there today that didn't do some things really well, and there's some things that they could do a lot better. And I think right now we want to reinforce the positives and get the negatives corrected. And I think an important part of that is every player can self-assess so they know what they have to do to get better. And, we have to be able to correct those guys and teach those guys and do the kind of things in practice that are going to help them have a chance to improve. So that would be the biggest focus that I would have, coming out of the scrimmage. I think that we can have a really, really good team. I'm not disappointed where our team is right now. Are we where we need to be? Absolutely not. Are we where we'd like to be? I think we just have to focus on what we need to do to improve, which I think probably every team in the country, if they were ready to play the first game right now, we wouldn't need to practice anymore. So we got a lot of young players in a lot of positions that can certainly benefit from first time under the fire in action. And we had some older guys that played really, really well in this scrimmage. And so we just got to try to build on that.
We'll start on the far side with Chandler.
Nick, you mentioned you wanted to get a good look at the special teams today. How did all the specialists perform, and how was the kicking game today?
Well, J.K. was fantastic with his punting. He did a really good job. I think the punt and punt return both were good. I think we got things to work on relative to, some of the other areas in the kicking game. We missed a couple field goals. We got a couple blocked because we didn't have really good protection. So, we really need to work hard on, that part of it. Kickoff and kickoff return seem to be doing really, really well. But I think we have to develop confidence in that area. And it's not just the kicker. It's the protection. It's the holder. It's the whole operation being on time. And we need to do a lot of work in that area.
Come back over here to Tony.
Coach, hot day out there and a lot of competition, as you said yesterday. Were there any flare-ups, or is there an extra competition at all during practice?
I don't know what you're talking about. What is extra competition?
The extra, maybe emotion in some of the position groups. Just with it being the first scrimmage, with there being so much competition going on.
Well, my feeling is, and I don't understand exactly what you're asking me, but I think we want every position to compete, and not one versus the other. It's all our team. All right, so one of the most important things about being a team is, players have to respect and trust the principles and values of the organization, and they also have to respect and trust each other. That means you play hard, you're physical, you give lots of effort, you compete like crazy against the guy you're playing against, but you also respect that guy's competing like crazy against you. And the fact that he's doing that's making you better. The fact that you're doing what you do makes you better. And if anybody gets emotional or loses their discipline, then you don't have any control of what happens. And then you have cause and effect, all right, which, we've had a bunch of speakers so far this fall, and every one of them, I don't care what they talked about. I don't care if they talked about drugs and alcohol. I don't care if they talked about recovery. I don't care if they talked about sleep. I don't care if they talked about having an accident that ended their career. They talked about having a successful career. If they had talked about having an unsuccessful career, every one of them came down to choices and decisions that had cause and effect. So players have to understand that. When you get emotional, you make bad choices and decisions. It usually has consequences. So we want players to compete. We want them to be emotional and intense in what they do, but we never want them to lose their discipline and their poise because that leads to penalties and bad things. So that's the consequences of it. And when you put yourself ahead of that, then that's not good for your team. So that's when you're putting yourself ahead of your teammates. So, that's what we want our players to learn. That's how we want them to play. And that's certainly what we'll continue to preach so that we can play hard and practice hard against each other and not have issues.
Middle back with Ryder.
Players had mentioned watching film of the Patriots. What's different about watching their film, maybe than other teams, and also how have they been able to apply that in practice, and how have you seen them apply that?
Well, if we put a play in that we haven't had here in the past, the way we always teach, what our teaching progression always is we show the players the play, in a diagram, and we show all the adjustments. And then if it's a play that we've run in the past, we can use our film to visually give them an example of that play. So they saw what to do. Now they get a visual of how to do it. In some cases, some of the things that we're doing, we've never done before. All right, so if they did it at the Patriots, and that's where we have to look at a film to get the teaching progression where they get a visual of how they're supposed to run a route or how they're going to run a play, then that's just part of our teaching progression. So we still have some of our teaching film that come from the Miami Dolphins 11 years later, because it may be one example of one thing that we want to teach that we have a good shot of. So I don't know what the difference is, but the purpose of it is to give the players a visual picture, whether it comes from our film, their film, or anybody else's film.
Right up front with Mark.
Just wanted to ask, were there any injuries during the scrimmage, or was anybody held out for injuries?
We held two guys out. We held Josh Jacobs out. He's got a pulled ham, and he may be out for several days, I don't know how long. Those things are difficult to determine. Najee Harris has a slight pull, and he'll be probably back on Monday. I don't know that we have anybody else we got bumps and bruises out there today, but I don't know that we'll have anybody else that would not practice on Monday.
Stay right in front with Chris Walsh.
New offensive coordinator, how'd the offense go with Brian Dable running things today?
Well, I didn't think we had the rhythm that we'd like to see on offense. I'm sure he would say the same thing to you. I don't think it's a reflection on him. I think it's, just the way it went today. We've had good days and we've had bad days, and today we made some plays and made some really good plays, but the consistency wasn't what it needed to be in terms of finishing some drives and playing with consistency. But there were a lot of good things to build on.
Back over to Michael.
Just with the new offensive coordinator like that, how much do you guys practice the operation of the play calling and the just the intangibles that come with getting things called quickly?
Well, we do it every day in practice. So, when we have team periods in practice, we put the coaches on the sidelines. We signal the defense. We signal the offensive plays. We call the plays, every day. So, that's basically, how we practice. Now, when we're doing 7-on-7 or we're doing a group period, we don't do that. We're out there coaching the players and trying to teach them how to do it. But you've heard me many times say there's a time. I used to be in the middle of it, coaching players all the time, coaching them every play, in team period and all that. And, Bill Belichick used to kick me out and say, let the players play. There's a time when you got to let them play. You call it, they have to make the adjustments, they have to do it. So we get that in the scrimmage, but we also get it in practice when we have team periods. And it gives the coaches a chance to practice what they're going to call situationally as well.
Finish up with Alex.
I've got a few questions for you. Just how much of a benefit is it right now to have so much experience back in that secondary? And a lot of the players have said they feel like they can be a strength this year.
Well, I think that, we have some good players in the secondary. I think the biggest focus that we have is trying to get them in the right spots. How do we match up the best? What kind of depth can we develop? That would be, what I would be concerned with. It's always good when you have players that have experience. They're a little bit ahead in terms of, what you're doing, how you're trying to do it, how they can help other players, and I think their leadership can be instrumental in helping develop some of the other players and the younger players who most certainly are going to have to play at some point in time during the season.
And secondly, I know obviously don't like to watch offensive line during scrimmages, but what kind of progress have you made from seen from Alex Leatherwood and Jedrick Wills, two young guys on that offensive line?
Well, I think both those guys have done well in practice. I can't honestly say how well they did in the scrimmage today, and we think both those guys have potential to help us. I think one of the big goals of the scrimmage today is at some point in time when this camp is over and we have another week of camp and we have another scrimmage, we got to say these are the guys that we have to invest time in to try to develop to help our team. And I think those two guys are most certainly two guys that at this point you would say that's probably going to be the case. But they have to continue to show maturity and develop, and I like to see how they did it under fire today, what kind of poise they had, how could they execute with any kind of consistency. We had a couple young guys out there today that went completely rat-trapped. They couldn't even get lined up. All right, so, that's all part of it. That's all part of it. Now, maybe they'll do better next time. But those two guys are both two guys that have shown a lot of potential. One was here in the spring, one wasn't. But I think both those guys are guys that we want to certainly invest a lot of time in this week and see if they can get to a point where they can help us this year.